Saskatchewan Penitentiary, its walls and towers deceptively peaceful in the still of winter. Deceptive, for behind these walls is a place of great violence, of gangs, riots, and racial strife. A place where scores are settled suddenly, without trial or mercy. Hells Angels informant and convicted murderer Aimé Simard requested a transfer here in 2003. In a lifetime of bad decisions, this proved to be his worst. Samard had survived as a marked man in some of this country's toughest prisons for 6 years. When he arrived at Sask Pen, he was dead within 6 weeks. Aimé Simard was murdered behind these walls in July of 2003, stabbed more than 70 times. A CBC News investigation has learned that the Correctional Service of Canada was warned that his life was in danger only weeks before his death, and that Simard himself had requested a transfer out of the prison only 2 days before he died. 7 months later, investigators are still trying to piece together whether Aimé Simard's violent death was connected to his violent past. Aimé Simard was a hired gun for the Hells Angels in Quebec, an assassin in the biker war that played out on the streets of Montreal. 1995, a war was raging between the Hells Angels and rival biker gangs for control of the city's multi-million-dollar drug and prostitution trade. Hells Angels leader Maurice "Mum" Boucher seemed to be operating with impunity, using gang members and biker wannabes to do his bloody bidding. Montreal journalist Julian Scher co-authored a book on the Hells Angels in Canada.
Aimé Simard was a contract killer, was a go-to guy that the bikers knew they could rely upon to do their dirty business, their killings and their beatings.
But Simard got sloppy. In early 1997, he was arrested for killing a member of a rival biker gang. Facing life in jail for this and 2 other murders, he cut a deal: testify against the Hells Angels in exchange for an early parole date. This was a huge break for police. A biker willing to stand in court and finger the Hells Angels in a murder case was extraordinarily rare. Not surprisingly, Simard's ratting on the Angels enraged Mum Boucher. He was determined to make it impossible for others to cut deals like Simard. He ordered the random killing of members of the justice system. 2 corrections officers were gunned down, the victims chosen for no other reason than they wore the blue shirts of prison officials.
The thing that terrified Maurice "Mum" Boucher and the other bikers more than anything else was a rat, an informant inside their organization, because they knew that the only way you're going to take down a biker is with a biker. The bikers know that the only way you can take down organized crime is through infiltration. So when Aimé Simard flips and is going to testify against his fellow bikers, Mum Boucher wanted to send out a message to his own ranks that this would not be tolerated.
Simard testified, but he was a terrible witness. The judge didn't believe him, describing him as remorseless and manipulative. The 5 bikers he ratted on all went free. But Simard still got his deal: parole eligibility after 12 years in jail. Aimé Simard, liar, thief, killer, and now a stool pigeon in jail. How is someone like Aimé Simard important to the justice system?
Without the testimony of the Aimé Simards, you're never going to topple the leaders of organized crime. So it's a dirty little secret in Canada's justice system, right? Is that informants are the grease that keep the wheels of justice turning. Whether you like it or not, you know, we as citizens have to use scum and killers and bikers to take down other bikers.
Simard did not take well to prison life, and he bounced around Canada's prison system. Valleyfield, Leclerc, Port Cartier, Sorel, all in Quebec. Kent in British Columbia. He racked up 111 charges in the 6 years he spent behind bars for getting drunk or stoned, fighting with inmates, threatening staff. He harmed himself 3 times. As Simard moved from jail to jail, hunted and haunted by his past, he learned that maximum security prisons were anything but secure.
When criminals go to jail, and especially when bikers go to jail, they don't stop being bikers. They don't stop being members of the gang. They don't sort of hang up their jacket and say, oh, I'm going to be a nice guy now that I'm in jail. The crime and all the structures and the gangs continue to operate in prison. Any guard, anybody who knows what it's like inside prison will tell you that the gangs operate and in many ways control entire wings of prisons.
Corrections made a list of 12 so-called incompatibles, inmates at specific prisons who had harmed Simard because of his public betrayal of the Hells Angels. So he was kept isolated from other inmates for his own protection, alone in his cell, 23 hours a day. Corrections records show that Simard asked for the transfer to Sask Pen. He chafed at the solitary life of a stool pigeon. Sources say that he believed that he would be able to spend more time outside his cell at the Prairie Prison. Simard arrived at Sask Pen on June 12, 2003. He moved on to C Range in the maximum security wing at Sask Pen, one of 5 ranges in the unit. He had his own cell, but shared the range with 14 other inmates. They were isolated from the general population, but not each other. Inmates were on the unit because they were at risk, or they were a risk. Kevin Grabowski speaks for the corrections officers who work at the prison. He says the Max unit is home to the most dangerous and violent men in the prison.
You earn your way there by the violence you do, by the risk you are to the public, the risk you are of escaping, the violence you've done within the prison on inmates, the violence you've done on staff. You earn your way to a maximum security level.
Simard's cell block was filled with inmates connected to biker and Indian gangs. Grabowski says frontline staff don't even feel safe.
There were 5 officers assaulted here not too long ago. There's a lot of inmate assaults. There's a lot of fires. A lot of officers are getting assaulted by having urine and feces and liquids, unknown liquids, thrown on them. With gang activity, it always breeds, of course, a lot of problems within the inmates themselves.
Grabowski says that corrections downplays these problems in public, and that cell block C was a dangerous place to send Aimé Simard.
It's gambling. It's a risk, and it would be a very poor risk.
For Mr. Simard.
Yes.
Could Aimé Simard's murder have been prevented? Correspondence obtained by CBC News shows that the Correctional Service of Canada was warned 2 weeks before Simard's murder of a major disturbance looming at Saskatchewan Penitentiary. An inmate in the Quebec region called his lawyer and gave the warning. He said it would involve trouble between B and C ranges, Simard's cell block, and that it was gang-related. And that wasn't the only sign of trouble. Sources say the authorities were warned again, this time by an inmate in the maximum security unit at Sask Pen, that Simard's life was in imminent danger. Perhaps even Simard sensed the danger. 2 days before his murder, he requested a transfer out of Sask Pen. The authorities have reported only the barest details on Simard's murder.
They located him in his cell and he was unconscious, so CPR was started and he was taken to the hospital but later pronounced dead. We are considering the circumstances of his death suspicious, and the RCMP are continuing their investigation into his death.
Sources tell CBC News that investigators have evidence linking 5 inmates to Simard's murder. 2 inmates planned the hit, 3 did the killing. They believe Simard was swarmed in his cell by the 3 men just before 10 o'clock, when inmates returned to their cells for the night. He was found by correctional officers on a scheduled patrol, shirtless and shoeless, face down on the floor in a pool of blood. A trail of bloody footprints led to the cell next to Simard's. That inmate, Elvin Starblanket, was in the unit awaiting trial on charges he beat to death a priest who had made sexual advances to him. Starblanket eventually pleaded guilty to killing the priest in a homophobic rage. Investigators are also focusing on Serge Depras, an inmate who transferred to Sask Pen in the fall of 2002. He came there from Port Cartier, a federal prison in Quebec. They believe that Depras was the ringleader, that he recruited Starblanket and other inmates with ties to Indian gangs in the Max unit. After Simard's body was removed from the cell block, inmates were heard yelling, "Another dead rat." Investigators are trying to find out whether the Hells Angels paid for the hit, payback for Simard's betrayal.
It happens from time to time. Perhaps sometimes, they don't want to do the dirty work themselves because it puts them at risk. And why not have a fall guy?
Staff Sergeant Bob Bazin is an organized crime expert with the Criminal Intelligence Service of Canada. He cannot discuss Simard's murder, but he says biker gangs like the Hells Angels will hire native gang members to do their dirty work, a marriage of muscle and money.
By virtue of the fact that they've either met on the street or met in a correctional setting, that they will, from time to time, work together, whether it be at having the street gang members sell some drugs for them, or perhaps approach people with respect to payment of debt and those type of things.
Whether gangs played a role in Simard's murder is not known, but Sask Pen warden Peter Gunther concedes one point. The system broke down that July night.
What I'm looking forward to from the investigation is to tell me, did we have the proper intelligence? Was the information that we should have had available to us? And once we received it, did we use it appropriately? Did we analyze it appropriately? And did we make the correct decisions based on that intelligence? And so the fact that Mr. Simard is dead, as you indicated, suggests that it didn't work as well as it should have.
Julian Scher says Aimé Simard was a marked man the moment he turned stool pigeon against the Hells Angels. But he says it didn't have to be a death penalty.
I think it's clear that the system broke down. You had somebody who cooperated with police, wasn't very useful, but did what he was supposed to do, and is set up as a virtual target inside one of the most dangerous places to be in a prison, surrounded by other killers. We could have just as well painted a bullseye on Aimé Simard and said, "Here he is, come and get him." And that's exactly what clearly organized crime did. This was an execution, but it was an execution that was facilitated by a breakdown in our system.
7 months later, and the people in charge of figuring out what happened to Aimé Simard still aren't talking. There's no indication when charges may be laid in his murder. Meanwhile, the inmates suspected of killing Aimé Simard are themselves now in protective custody. For The National, I'm Dan Zakreski.